Hello everyone, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this is Who Cares, where we're going to discuss and debate the Doctor on his adventures through space and time.
So get ready to see the angriest eyebrows this side of Sauron the last time he bitch-slapped Gandalf.
Yes, this is the first episode of Who Cares, where we're going to be discussing Doctor Who. And we finally returned to the Doctor after almost a year of his absence since the Christmas special. And we come back with something that every Who fan always finds interesting, a new Doctor.
Yes, new Doctor Peter Capaldi, who is a lot older than Matt Smith and his predecessor David Tennant, and I gotta say, I like it.
Yeah, at the time of the filming, he was actually equal in age to William Hartnell, the first Doctor, which is actually kind of interesting that they're the same exact age.
He looks a lot younger, to be fair.
Yeah, the actual reason for that is because the first Doctor had a wig on, and he was actually made to look older than he actually was at the time. Also, his alcohol issues didn't help, I assume.
Yeah,
but
he smoked like a chimney.
Yeah. Everyone did, though, so it's okay.
Yeah, it was cool. It was cool back then.
But before we actually discuss the episode Deep Breath, written by Stephen Moffat, I think it's important to talk about some of the new stuff for the season.
Yeah, I think the first thing that strikes you has to be the intro, right?
Yeah, the theme song, although it's still obviously the Doctor Who theme song that we all know, it's changed, as happens every once in a while, and the intro itself has changed vastly. Before we actually talk about the intro, let's talk about the music. Honestly, I don't think it's as good as it has been the past couple of years.
No, I feel like they went higher pitched with it, and it sounds like they're trying to sound more classic. Does that make sense?
No, I see what you're saying. I agree with you on that. And I mean, I get that they want to differentiate themselves from the Matt Smith years, which is a good thing to do.
Absolutely.
The show is predicated on change, and I respect that and I embrace that. But this change, I don't think is necessarily for the better. Is it really bothering me? No, it's not that big of a deal.
I just think one of those fanboys on Reddit. It's like, fuck that song!
No, but I do think that the Doctor Who theme song, part of its purpose is to kind of get you hyped up for the show, and I think the Matt Smith and David Tennant and Christopher Eccleston theme songs, while slightly different, all did that. It all gave you the Doctor Who feel.
This one kind of makes you feel almost uneasy.
I don't know about that. It just isn't as exciting. It's not as upbeat. It's not as... It doesn't have the adventure-y feel.
But you know what? I'm sure by episode 4
I'm sure I'll get used to it too, but it's important to note. Also, the intro itself, this is actually really cool, and the background about it is pretty cool as well.
Yeah, it was actually fan-made. Originally, it was just a YouTube video that he made for consideration, and then they actually got him to come and make it, like, for the show. So that's pretty cool. Here's a link to the original that he just put on YouTube, and I think it's awesome. I like the change. It's a little busier than you're probably used to if you're a diehard Who fan. But I totally like it. And then they give you a little eyebrows right at the end, right before.
I like that we see the face again, which was actually brought back last year with Matt Smith's final season. They had his face in the opening title too. And I like that it's just the eyes, because that is one of Capaldi's most striking features. Yep. I like the whole clock motif that they have with the gears. That being said, I think I like the original fan-made one from YouTube a little bit more, because, again, it has kind of a better version of the theme, in my opinion, and while I'd like to be able to judge them separately, they are kind of linked. Also, I think I like the... There's a little bit more of space in the original YouTube one, which I like. But the new one is very, very, very good. I like the gears, and I like the clock face.
And I think how circular it is. It has a very Gallifrey thing, which is clearly going to be a theme coming up. Yeah. Because the writing's very circular.
So that's the theme song. I guess we should probably talk about the actual episode.
There's a lot of new stuff, though. We got to cover it.
Firstly, let's talk about the plot. Let's talk about the plot and what happened in the episode. Okay. And before we do this, do be aware, I think it should be obvious, but there are, of course, going to be spoilers for the first episode of Series 8. Yeah. So, the Doctor does finally crash land after Matt Smith's Christmas special episode, The Time of the Doctor, in which he finally regenerates after saving the town of Christmas on the planet of Trenzalore with a little help of the Time Lords, and a new set of regenerations.
But if you'll remember, he almost instantaneously changes from Matt Smith over to the new Doctor. So what happens is, crash lands, he's not done really fully regenerating. He's changed, but he's not through the process. So he's basically going in and out of sleep, and then actually Vastra has to knock his ass out, and it's arguably the worst sound effect in the episode.
Piano.
She touches him on the forehead, tricks him into psychic linking, basically, and it makes a boing sound. But he's out for a little bit. And you think, going into it, oh, this is going to be like Tennant's first episode, where he sleeps the whole time and saves the day at the end. I'm really glad they didn't do that. Because Capaldi, he's so good as this new, way different Doctor.
Yeah, and especially I think there were a lot of concerns, not from a lot of the long-running fan base, especially people who are aware of Classic Who, but some of the newer people who got on, especially during Matt Smith's time, because it seemed like there was an uptick in American viewership during Matt Smith's run, because they increased marketing and stuff, and there were some episodes based in America because they wanted to push it. So they're used to a very young Doctor. They've gone from the youngest Doctor of all time to now the oldest. So that's a huge shift, and I think people were worried, oh, he's not going to have the energy, he's not going to have the adventure. Oh, no, right away. I think Moffat actually wrote it intentionally for him to be like, no, let me show you what he can do.
I mean, he almost wakes up immediately and starts writing frantically after he literally sniffs out a piece of chalk on the floor. And he has just amazing lines like, what is this room? You just have a room with a bed in it? Yeah, you use it to sleep. What do you do the rest of the time? We go to another room. You have a room specifically not to be awake in? And it's just stuff like that where he's just so passionate about just the ridiculous things to him about human life. And it's just crazy.
And I think that shows in part 2 that this Doctor is going to be a little different than Matt Smith in the sense that Matt Smith was a really likable guy who I think really got humans. Capaldi is not going to be so. I think he's going to be more alien, almost like the Fourth Doctor, in the fact that he doesn't quite get human social customs and normality, and there's some good comedy that can come from that.
Yeah.
So as the plot continues, the dinosaur from the opening, if you've seen the episode, you know what we're talking about, bursts into flame while the Doctor is onlooking, and he's horrified. He runs to the scene of the crime and decides he needs to take the case of this dinosaur murder. He ends up in an alley with this bum. Probably my second favorite scene of Capaldi in this first episode, where you get a lot of his jokes where he's talking about, he references the Fourth Doctor in his scarf, and then he realizes he's Scottish, which was one of the funniest jokes in the episode. I wondered if they'd address it. I assumed they would, but I didn't know how they would.
Right. And it's really funny, and then he makes a joke about how he can actually complain for real from now on, because as our European friends will know, the Scots are very good at complaining, especially about the English.
Yeah. And then we get to the part of the episode that I'm honestly not so fond of, and I've seen a lot of people complain about the episode, which I don't necessarily agree with, but there are parts that I'm not too keen on, and I'll talk about them here. We get a lot of Clara in this episode, which, A, I don't think Clara is that interesting, but B, in this episode she does get more development that she's gotten in the previous half a season, probably. She finally becomes humanized because she has problems with the new Doctor and him being old. This, however, does also cause some plot issues because she has seen older versions of the Doctor. In his timeline and in Day of the Doctor, she met 2 other versions of the Doctor, one of them being John Hurt, who is incredibly, I don't want to say incredibly old, that sounds mean, but he's much older.
He's older, yeah.
He's older, he's an older guy.
But I think what is really more important, though, is that Matt Smith was her Doctor. To her, Tennant and Hurt are other Doctors that aren't hers. And obviously, if anyone watches the Clara Matt Smith episodes, there's a romantic inkling there that they never obviously follow through with, but it's there. And they kind of mention it early on.
I get what Moffat is doing. He's doing almost a fourth wall break where he's kind of, Clara is the fans
girl
that might be put off by Capaldi's age. I get that. And if they had just touched on it, I think I'd be a little better with it. I'm not mad about it. I understand that it is necessary for a certain segment of the fan base, which I think is unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
But it became a major plot point, which is kind of weird. I think if they toned it down a little, it would have worked better.
I could have used more Capaldi and less Clara, but I think I could just use less Clara more times than not. But I only think it's because after she is no longer the impossible girl, she's not really that interesting.
I'm hoping this season, because the rumor is this might be her last season, which I know I talked to you about and you're excited about.
I'm excited about it, but only because I don't like them keeping the link to Matt Smith for too long.
I guess, but that always happens. I mean, there's always going to be some carryover, and she's it. And I think this season, hopefully, we'll get more character development, and she'll be more interesting as a character on her own instead of this plot device that was the Impossible Girl. Moving on to another key point in the episode, which people are very divided on, is the Paternoster gang, which is Madame Vostra, Jenny, and Strax, who we've seen a couple times before. The last time we saw them was Trenzalore in Name of the Doctor. Before that, it was the Crimson Horror, and before that, it was the Snowmen. So we've seen them a couple times in the past season, quite a bit. They're becoming almost the new. They're kind of like what can I even compare them
Mickey.
to?
They're kind of the new Mickey.
I guess they
kind of show up every once in a while. Sometimes they'll be in a whole episode. Sometimes they'll just be mentioned. I think Strax jokes work in doses. Don't get me wrong. Every Strax joke so far has been a hit for me. I don't think I've thought one time when he called a girl a boy that it wasn't funny. But if it keeps happening, we're going to be desensitized, and it's just not going to work. Though I really do like the character of Jenny, because I think she's really interesting. And she actually has the best scenes of the not Claras or doctors in this, because you can see that she's kind of almost a third party to the activity, because Vostra obviously takes charge and Clara's the other one. And they have a really good scene where Clara stands up for herself and Jenny claps, and it's really funny. But I mean, I
like her as a character. I like all of them as characters in theory. My problem, it hasn't been a problem for me in the other episodes. This episode, it got really annoying, is every single joke, I'm not even exaggerating, go back and watch it, 99% of the jokes Vostra makes are either, I'm a lesbian, and we're married, and which basically is, again, which I have no problem with that being a joke. That can be funny, but like...
We get it.
You can do that joke once or twice, but after that it's like, yep, you made that joke already, now do another thing, because you can be an interesting, fun character. It's like Moffat wants to write a same-sex couple, but he doesn't realize they can just be normal character people, so now he's trying to write them like that's their one character trait, and it's a little annoying. I hope
But at least Jenny clearly has more layers than Vostra's written, so it's always good that way.
So I think that's enough about them. The villain of the episode is the Clockwork Droids. Again, they were featured in The Girl in the Fireplace from Season 2 of Tennant's Tenure.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
That episode was also written by Moffat, so he's bringing them back here. They're a little different, though. They're from the sister ship of the Madame de Pompadour. Their ship is the SS Marie Antoinette, and they are robots who accidentally went back to the beginning of time on Earth, basically, and have been hanging out ever since, hoping to get to what they call the Promised Land.
Yeah, and how they're doing it is they're luring people. I presume they used to lure them differently, but now they lure them into a restaurant, and they basically harvest organs and tissue to try to make their ship fly and keep themselves repaired. Also, it turns out that they are the culprits of the dinosaur murder, and they make a point to note that he's so hell-bent on getting to the Promised Land that he killed an entire dinosaur just for the optic nerve, which is only a couple inches.
Yeah, it's not so much a continuation, it's just expanding the fact that these Clockwork Droids do exist and this other thing happened. I mean, I've heard people say it's lazy of Moffat. I don't think that's lazy. I think that's interesting. It worked fine. I thought the effects on the main droid...
Really, really well.
Really cool. The clockwork stuff was cool. You could see inside his head. Looked like it worked and stuff.
And it looked like a practical effect, too, which is hard to pull off in a day where people just want to shove special effects down your face.
And, of course, the Doctor shows up and dismantles their entire plan, and we'll get to what happens at the end of that after we're done talking about the final thing which we're going to touch on, and that is the most important thing of a new Doctor, the new Doctor himself, Peter Capaldi.
Now, Peter Capaldi owns every single scene he's in. Much like Matt Smith in every great episode of a Matt Smith episode, kind of like Rings of Akatan comes to mind. Capaldi just seems like he's such a strong presence, and you can tell he's a good actor, and you can tell he's into it, and it's just awesome.
Yeah, I think he's excellent, because I like Matt Smith, I like David Tennant, and of course Christopher Eccleston as well. I don't want to leave him out. Peter Capaldi is such a good actor. He can do a performance without putting as much effort in, if that makes sense. Certainly he's putting effort in, but I think when Matt Smith, for instance, gives a speech in, let's say, the Pandorica opens to all those spaceships, or in the Rings of Akatan to the sun god, whatever you want to call it, he's really putting effort in. It seems like, I feel like almost he has an acting coach to the side saying, here's what you have to do, and here's this. Peter Capaldi can look at the camera the right way,
and he does it.
He can put emotion into it without yelling, and I think that's one thing Matt Smith kind of, when he was really acting, he was yelling and he was flailing around.
But to be fair to Matt Smith, that was that Doctor.
No, I know.
Doctor was theatrical.
I know,
and I think they cast it perfectly for the style they wanted, but. if it was an acting showdown, kind of like a dance-off, but with acting, Capaldi would win hands down. He is the Justin Timberlake of acting as Justin is to dancing.
Yeah. Matt Smith always seemed like he was all over the place. His mind was going 1,000 places at once, and he didn't know where he was going. Peter Capaldi,
it's like a razor blade.
He picks his words. He knows exactly what he wants to say, and he says it the way he wants to say it. He's meticulous. And finally, at the end, when he does confront the clockwork droid, one of two things happens. Either he pushes him off because they are in a hot air balloon made of skin. Again, if you've seen the episode, you know what we're talking about. If not, you should go watch the episode. He either pushes him out of it, or he talks him into jumping, and I think him talking him into jumping is the far more interesting and maybe more likely of the two.
Right. And I like how you're not sure whether this doctor is capable of pushing a living thing from a great height to its death.
Yeah.
I like it. Mm-hmm. Now, most Doctor Who fans that have been around for a little while would think, no, the Doctor couldn't do that. But this one's so dark. Not in like an evil way at all, but just so you could easily see him taking that step and pushing it off, or being so manipulative that he could talk someone into killing themselves.
Yeah, and I really like the way he has the droid sit down and have a drink with them, which is funny because no other Doctor before has actually liked alcohol. If you remember back to Matt Smith even.
Scottish.
Yeah, I know. Matt Smith, spit out alcohol when he was given it in, the lodger. I know what happened. But he sits down and he's like, here, have a scotch with me. It looks like scotch. Yeah. And it's so classy, and he so owns it. Good for him.
And then, I mean, even after that little bit, you get the payoff of the new Doctor outfit, and it's so simple, but it looks just perfect on the guy.
Yeah, and we also get the TARDIS console room is pretty much the same. There's a color change, so it's warmer colors. It's an orange instead of a green, which, it's a little difference, but it makes...
But it has a less inviting feeling at the same time. It seems more like a study than a place where crazy hijinks occur.
Yeah, and he has bookshelves and stuff, a lot like the 8th Doctor, and to a lesser extent the 7th Doctor in the movie. Yeah, it should be really interesting to see what he does with that. And then we get Clara decides she's going to leave this Doctor because she doesn't know who he is anymore. Yeah. Again, I'm not fully sold on that, but I get why Moffat wrote it.
Yeah. And then you get the payoff of the entire first episode. And I think if you're a Doctor Who fan, you need to watch it no matter what. And basically what happens is the last Doctor calls Clara on her phone. He calls from Trenzalore as he's dying right before she walks into the TARDIS and hangs up the phone, if you remember that scene. Mm-hmm. And it's not nearly the saddest scene in any Doctor Who, but it certainly is one of the most gratifying.
Mm-hmm. I really like that scene, not just because of that. I mean... It's cool to see Matt Smith one more time, but, his farewell was the last episode he was in. Right after she hangs up, though, and Capaldi is trying to say, she's like, why were you listening to the phone call? And he said, I wasn't listening to the phone call. That was me on the phone. You can't see me. Just see me. That, another example of his good acting. You believe it when he says it.
Yeah.
That's good for him.
And the scene kind of fades out where they're going to get coffee, and it seems like they're going to, work it out, and she's going to travel with him. Mm-hmm. And then you get the stinger.
Yeah. We open up to the Clockwork Robot, who we saw killed, waking up in, presumably, the Promised Land, which he had been trying to get to the whole episode, and the Doctor had told him, this is just a fantasy you made up over time. But he wakes up there, and there's a woman there who calls herself Missy.
Now, Missy says, basically to the effect of, hey, this is heaven, and then she spins around, does a little dance, kind of, and she's very eccentric, and she calls the Doctor her boyfriend, and it's wildly intriguing and confusing, and you don't know what the hell's going on, and the droid that died seems fine, other than his hair was a little unkempt, and then it fades out. But there's so many theories. Who is Missy?
I've heard a couple things. The leading ones, I just call them leading because I find the most interesting. The first one that I heard even was the Master, and the reasoning for that is, well, we haven't seen the Master in a while.
Right.
Also, Missy could be short for Mistress, which would be the female version of Master, which, it has been established by Moffat before that Time Lords can change gender during their regenerations.
Right.
With the Corsair in the Doctor's Wife episode.
That would make a very interesting curve, especially because now Gallifrey's out there.
The second one I've heard is maybe it's the TARDIS somehow. Again, sort of like the Doctor's wife. I don't like that one as much.
Me neither, because we saw her already with the Ood and all that. And I think that was the best TARDIS performance you're ever going to get anyways.
Yeah.
So I really don't think it is the TARDIS. It doesn't make sense to me.
The third I've heard, which I just actually heard today, and I think is interesting. I don't know how they would get it in, especially with the boyfriend comment. But maybe Moffat could write it somehow that make it not that. Is, what if it's Susan, the Doctor's granddaughter, who has somehow regenerated and is really mad at him because in the first season of Doctor Who, or at least it was the first Doctor, back in 1962 or 3, he left her in a post-apocalyptic future because she met a guy there she was into, but it was the post-apocalypse, and said, "I'll be back for you." And here we are 50 years later. He never went back. And yes, I'm aware in the expanded universe he did go and see her in some of the audios, but the audios aren't necessarily canon. And yes, I'm aware of the things that happened in Night of the Doctor, but just because Moffat made the companions canon does not make everything that happened canon. Anyways, I think it being Susan and revisiting some of the classic Who stuff like that would be very interesting.
Now, the fourth one I've heard that's less compelling is that it's evil Clara.
I've heard that too, like, because, Name of the Doctor, she got splintered off all across this timeline.
Yeah.
What if one of them, for some reason, turned out not so good, turned out evil?
And also, she was on Gallifrey in the very first, right when the Doctor steals the TARDIS, so she could have been a Time Lord in that continuum, and maybe it'll work. That seems a little far-fetched, but I think if you're going to take Clara out, and you wanted to do it in a big way, it'd be a really, really big twist to do it on. So maybe that's it.
Maybe. But if you guys want, you can leave your theories for that in the comments, and we'll talk about them. Other than that, final thoughts on the episode. I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't perfect, certainly. I thought it was a little long. It had a longer running time than the average episode. But
about 70 minutes?
Yeah, but you could also argue that allowed for slower pacing, which Moffat said he wanted anyway, so I guess it worked out for him.
Yep.
I thought some of the characters and characterizations were not perfect, but at the end of the day, we were there for Capaldi and his first performance, and he did an excellent job. So really, at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for. I'll give this episode 4 TARDISes out of 5. It was alright for a regen.
That's what I'm going to give it to. 4 out of 5. And I expect great things out of Capaldi, actually. I was a little reserved when they announced his cast, but after I had seen just some screenshots, and after I had actually seen this episode, not a worry anywhere in there. I think he's going to do great, and I think he's in a good position to threaten Matt Smith or David Tennant for the best of the new Doctor Who.
I agree. I think he's doing a really good thing, and I'm excited to see what he does this Saturday in Into the Dalek.
I wonder what he does.
Goes into a Dalek, probably.
You think so?
Yeah.
It's called Into the Dalek.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
So, anyways, if you like this series, go ahead and subscribe. Leave a comment on what you thought about the episode. You can up thumb it, whatever you call it.
Thumbs uppins. If you like us, just in general, you can go to our Patreon. There's a link right there. You can throw us a bone if you want. You can get stuff, and there's also access to extras.
So, until next time, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this has been Who Cares?
Who Cares?